¿Sabías que 1 de cada 5 peces en el mundo es atrapado de forma ilegal? En muchos lugares, el ecosistema marino está tan alterado que ya amenaza la sostenibilidad de la pesca y cuanto aporta al suministro de alimentos de la raza humana. Y es difícil controlar una superficie más grande que todo Sudamérica en agua para cualquiera. Demostrarlo en el marco legal internacional y denunciarlo rápido en mis aguas es uno de los grandes retos a los que pocos se enfrentan cada día. Yo solo puedo ser naturalmente mar, pero quizás tú, ¿te imaginas? Avante, enfrenta el desafío.
Bienvenido a Innovapolinav. Esto es un esfuerzo de la Armada llevado adelante por la Academia Politécnica Naval y la Dirección de Programa de Investigación y Desarrollo con el fin de dar un espacio para el emprendimiento y la innovación. Todos los encuentros virtuales que hemos llevado a cabo han sido posibles gracias al patrocinio del Gobierno Regional de Valparaíso y el soporte de Corfo con su programa de apoyo al entorno para el emprendimiento y la innovación. Les recuerdo que están disponibles las bases del concurso de innovación abierta Avante 2020. Además, el formulario de postulación ya está disponible para ser descargado. Recuerden que esto se cierra el día 30 de noviembre, que es el día lunes al mediodía. Así es que para que envíen sus postulaciones con tiempo. La semana pasada contamos con la presencia de un entretenido panel de economistas renombrados de nuestro país. Me refiero a Rodrigo Wagner, Andrés Saller y a José Miguel Benavente, con quienes hablamos de la mirada económica que puede significar el rol de la inversión en I+D+I en defensa para el desarrollo de nuestro país. Si no pudieron estar presentes o les gustaría volver a ver cualquiera de las conferencias que ya se hayan realizado, pueden acceder a nuestra página web www.innovapolinav.cl y allí encontrarán nuestras todas las conferencias para que puedan revisar. Hoy nos acompaña Yasrine Ibnyahya. Lo dije bien, creo, Yasrine. Muy difícil tu nombre. Ella es directora de tecnología y conceptos avanzados en Inmarsat. Yasrine es responsable de liderar innovaciones disruptivas y conceptos de emisión en etapa temprana para una larga operación satelital, entregando conectividad global. Ella se ha vuelto el puente entre las tendencias externas y el mapa tecnológico de la estrategia interna de Inmarsat. Es una de las cofundadoras de Oxbridge Angels y es una de los miembros del comité de inversión en ese fondo de capitales ángeles. Se graduó de la Universidad de Cambridge, donde obtuvo el grado de Executive MBA en 2018. Además es Master of Science de la Universidad de Bristol en Sistemas de Comunicación y Procesamiento de Señales y obtuvo el grado de Ingeniera en Comunicaciones de la Escuela Nacional Superior de las Telecomunicaciones en Francia. Yasrine es juez y mentora de startups y embajadora para la diversidad. Fue nombrada en 2018 líder del año por WinTech Series Award y hablaremos con ella hoy día acerca de cómo hacer que la innovación ocurra. Les recuerdo que estaremos recibiendo todas las preguntas en el chat del webinar y durante la conversación además tenemos disponible un traductor de manera simultánea abajo en el icono del globo. Ahí pueden seleccionar el idioma a través del cual quieren escuchar este webinar. Así que bienvenida Yasrine, bienvenida. Te dejo con nuestra audiencia para que conversemos respecto de cómo hacer que pase la innovación.
Hello, thank you. Muchas gracias por su invitación. That's how far I'm going to go in Spanish. Thank you very much for your invitation. Would you like me to share my screen now? Perfect. So welcome everyone, and I'm really pleased to be sharing with you today some of my key tips, and I will have 10 tips to share with you about how to make innovation happen in an organization and what is the innovation mindset that that an organization needs to have. And the first point we're going to cover is, first of all, before even thinking about how to make innovation happen in your organization, is to first and foremost, get your house in order first. What that means is that you would look, for example, at your core products and capabilities, and you would compare and benchmark your products against competition, for example. You could look at things like what is your year-on-year growth, and is your year-on-year growth comparable to the industry average? Are you doing better? Are you doing worse? And based on that, deciding what is your growth game plan and which areas you're going to invest money and which are the products you're going to kill, for example. And then allocate the right resources to that kind of core capability you have in your business. And this is the precursor to innovation. Only once you've done that, you can start thinking about how to make your innovation process start. And it comes with identifying opportunities. And I don't know how you're exploring new ideas in your organizations, but very often with your organization, thinking about starting off with a brainstorming sessions. And this is the worst that could happen. Do not start with brainstorming. It's more important to start with 3 steps in your ideation generation, which is, first of all, start gathering information, accumulating knowledge about the topic. Then move into generating new ideas. And at that point, all the ideas are very much welcome. Only then you can start thinking about which ideas you want to kill, which ones you do not want to kill and want to push forward in your innovation process. That is very important, because if people are saying during those initial stages, no, it won't work, or no, we've done this in the past, it did not work, this is the best way of killing innovation. And so it's very important to get that process of ideas being shared, and then slowly generating ideas and then evaluating them. And only then you can start killing. And it's important to kill ideas, but not too soon in the process. Another key important element where making innovation happen is what are the metrics you're using? What is the structure you're putting in place when trying to create innovation capability within your organization? And it's very important to look at the structures in terms of, do you need dedicated innovation teams, or do you need to have an innovation culture in your organization? What are the metrics you're using? Are you measuring people based on the revenues, or are you measuring them on the number of ideas that are being generated? It's a completely different ways of supporting your departments to start innovating. So based on that, the second tip is to find the right balance between the past, the present, and the future. And there is a quite famous writer called Vijay Govindarajan, who has written this 3-box solution approach, where we look at the present, and today's organization is very much optimized to manage the present, the product of the present, but it's not optimized to manage your future. So it's quite interesting to have an approach whereby you look at managing your presence, which is very much data-driven and insights-driven, and people are very much accountable for what they're doing. However, you have to become selective about forgetting about key things around the past and letting go of the way we used to do things in order to be able to create the future, which is setting up a new strategy with new processes, new business models that are not necessarily fully influenced by the way we used to do things in the past. So that's, and having this conscious approach, balancing what needs to be forgotten about the past, how to manage the present, and how to create new accountability capabilities for the future is an important approach in innovation. Now, concretely, what that means is that the way, for example, I handle innovation in my team, because I'm in charge of an innovation department, is I take the approach of the experimentation mindset. What that means is when we come up with a new innovation idea, we do not know what are the full requirements. Some organizations have very much a linear process where, first of all, we need the requirements, then we need to design the solution, then we launch the product, and only then we talk to the customer. This is not how you're going to get the best results. It's more important to make a hypothesis, which is an initial requirement between quote unquote, but this is a hypothesis that you will constantly be revising as the evidence unfolds, as the assumptions of the economic world or the customer are starting to be more understandable. And so you design your experimentation just like you were a chemical engineer, and you really identify the hypotheses. You identify what you do not know, and how you're going to bring knowledge on your unknowns by developing this hypothesis, designing the test, conducting the experiment, and evaluating the results. And based on the insights you get from the results, you would decide, do I need to do now a second experimentation to validate the second assumptions? And that's a quite important thing. And all the innovations I personally work on, even if it's for the space industry, which may be perceived as a quite complex environment, start with those small steps of experimentation. Now, the way I'm doing it at the moment is by designing 3 types of experimentations. Experimentation number 1 is what we call the proof of concept. So here, the question you ask yourself is, does the product or does the service or does the technology work as intended? Which is this is about validating the technology, for example. Does it work? Which is very different from the next question and the next experimentation you will design, which is the proof of value, which means, does the product or the technology address the customer needs? How does the customer is using it? And will it create value to the customer? And is the value you thought it would create to the customer the same as the way the customer is perceiving the value of this solution? So here, it's a completely different design. You work hand in hand with the customer. You show them the early stage results you get from your proof of concept, and you try to see the actual behavior of the customer towards the solution and the appetite they have. And then you can redesign again your product based on that. Finally, you have a 3rd type of experimentation, which is a prototype. And as we move on from proof of concept to proof of value to prototype, we spend more and more money on those initiatives. So the prototype would answer the question, can we make it at the right price point? Can we effectively productize the service at the right scale? So those questions are getting closer to the end product. But before we jumped into the prototype, we have gone through the 2 previous steps. Now, you may have cases where you know the technology works, but you don't know how the customer will use it, or the value it's creating, or you want to be hand in hand with the first customer. So you can jump straight to proof of value or prototype if needed. But that's how this experimentation mindset gets introduced in corporation. Another important tip is, how do you sell it internally in order to get your budget or your funding? In the case of corporations and organizations, very often we do business case. We talk about the net present value, which is like a projection of the revenue associated to this product. The reality is, when we innovate, we don't know the customer, or we don't know the technology, or we don't know if the business model is the right one, and sometimes it's the 3. And so it's very, very hard to be able to bring with confidence a business case to a board or to an executive team. And therefore, the way we build our cases are now more focused about not only the net present value of the project, but also the option value. The option value is about the right, but not necessarily the obligation to participate at a later stage. So it's saying, if all the conditions are met, this is the best case scenario. This is the size of the opportunity we would unlock with this innovation. And then we create an incubator. Chile is very famous, for example, for Startup Chile, is an environment where there is a lot of startups incubation happening in the country. And this is the best environment to develop new capabilities, new technologies, new assets at a very low cost. We see the potential, but we start with this experimentation culture and mindset, which is very much part of the DNA of the startups, but not always part of the DNA of very large corporations or governments. So this is an important approach, to take this almost startup mindset in the way we approach the innovation, and bring this decision point to a later stage by bringing step-by-step innovations. And we introduce a new concept, which is almost like a gate stage, which is the pivot or proceed process. The pivot or proceed process, or the POP meetings we would have, is what you would do at the end of an experimentation. You would look at the results of your experimentation and you would be, yes, we confirm the technology works. Or no, we've done the test and actually the limitations of the system are X, Y, Z, and therefore we need to redo another experimentation, or we have to kill the concept because it does not make sense anymore. So having this pivot or proceed approach is also something startups do naturally. But in corporations, once we have approved a business case, sometimes we're stuck with a technology choice or a solution, even if we know it's already dead, even before reaching the market. So it's important to bring that flexibility a little bit more. The last point on this slide, which is very important, is remaining small teams during the early stage of the development. The bigger the team, the more likely the innovation is going to die, because people will have opinions about why it's not going to work, and the decision making is going to be slower, and the pace at which you're going to innovate is not going to be competitive anymore. So it's very important to have the key people working together, making fast decisions, being empowered to make those fast decisions and change the strategy of the solution, even if it has evolved from the original hypothesis. The next one is a quite important tip, is the way we manage innovation is like a venture capitalist. So basically having this portfolio mindset and there's a theory that is about the portfolio theory, which says that when you increase the diversity of your innovation, you decrease the risks of failure. Because out of your portfolio of 10, 15, 20 innovations, one will be extremely amazing and will probably cover for the cost of all the other ones. So it's quite important to have this wide spread of portfolio and innovations. Now, if you start innovating only on a single sector or single topic, you're not diversifying. So the way we diversify is also by looking at where do I have to innovate to sustain my core capability, because we talk about, in that case, of incremental innovation. In the space industry, we're going to try to do faster performance or cheaper terminals, or I don't know, those kind of, this is maintaining our core capability, but having that incremental investment in order to sustain our competitive edge. The other kind of innovation is looking at adjacencies. So for example, you would look at your core product, but see, can you serve that same product to a new market? Or you would ask yourself, still in the adjacencies, can I address the same market I have today, but with different products? So those are the things, like you already have one bit of the solution, either you have the customer or you have the product, and you're trying to expand the reach by innovating on those adjacencies. The last and the hardest level of innovation is what we call the novel growth, or the breakthrough innovation or disruptive innovation. This is where you don't have the product, you don't have the customer, you don't have the business model, and you're trying to innovate on all of those elements, which is the hardest one to succeed on. Then the next point I'd like to make here, when you manage your portfolio of innovation, is also defining which boundaries you are innovating on and which dimensions you feel weak and therefore you would like to innovate upon. And so this is what we see in the right-hand side on the innovation radar. Here you can see that as an organization, you could look at innovation not just based on product and services, but you could look at through the offering, the what you're doing, the platform, the solution, but you could look also at who are your customers, what is their customer experience, how do you capture value of that of those customers. For example, the likes of Google or Facebook will do a huge amount in customer experience and value capture by gathering more and more data about their users. So this is where they're perhaps innovating quite a lot. Processes is also another area where we could see a lot of innovation happening in the organization structure, in the supply chain management, as well as your brand and your networking. So innovating is a conscious assessment of, as we said, core, sustainable, adjacent or novel. Where in your innovation radar do you innovate, and how do you take a portfolio approach to your innovation? The next one is about the culture, and particularly here the audience is more government structure perhaps, And so as organizations, you might be very much comfortable with the coordination norm, which is focusing on proficiency, delivering very well-defined, reliable performance, consistency with very strong procedures. This is the coordination norms, and that works very well when you have a very operational organization you're trying to optimize. Now, if you're trying to be innovative, you need to bring another dimension on top of that, which is the cooperation norm, which is about creativity. And creativity is when we drive from their innovation. And so the two cultures have to work together. If I take the example of a satellite failure, let's say, and in that case, I need to make sure my operations team are following a very strong procedure to make sure they bring back the satellite to life. This is not where you should be innovative. At that point, it's very important to follow procedures. It's very important to be very well coordinated. But there are other times where we would set up times and moments and teams that would look at how we could improve those operations, procedures, where we could do a little bit things different, automated, maybe using artificial intelligence or things like that. This is where we would start collaborating, cooperating with different teams to bring that new edge to the department. Another, and still staying on the collaboration culture, it is much harder to manage a collaborative team than the other norm I talked about, which is coordination. Here we can see that on this graph, in general, we have noticed that when we create a new team, and that team, let's say, is brought together, the leader of that team has to ensure of three things. One is that there is a very good knowledge sharing between the team member in order to keep that collaboration culture. If we start giving very strong differentiation between each employees and they have to work in silo, then you will not have that innovation, you will not have that collaboration. So the knowledge exchange within the team is extremely important for innovation culture and for collaboration culture. Group solidarity is also very important, making sure the teams has each other's back, they're supporting each other, they're covering for each other. So that's a very important element to maintain very good team performance. And finally, and most importantly, there should be a relationship of commitment and trust between the team member in charge of that innovation. If you do not meet as a team leader those criteria, what you're going to see very soon is after 1 year, 1.5 years after creation of the team will collapse. The team performance will be really low and you will not be able to deliver as you were expected to. So that's the first hurdle to pass over. And this is where the leader of the team has a very strong role to play here. And then over the year, we see an increased performance. If we manage to create this knowledge sharing culture, this group solidarity, very strong relationship and commitment and trust between the team member, the team performance is going to go really high. And after a while, somehow around 3 years, for whatever reason, the team performance is going down. And that's very strange because everybody gets along, everybody supports each other. The issue that happens here is that we're losing diversity of thoughts. Everybody starts thinking exactly the same way. Everybody starts being so strongly supportive of each other that they all think the same and they all reject in one block views and ideas coming from the outside world. And that's a quite interesting thing because as an individual in the team, you would feel like, yeah, I get along with my teammate. I don't understand why the management thinks we're not performing, but because everybody starts thinking the same. And so as an organization, it's very important to have a think about how to maintain that diversity by, for example, bringing new skills within the team. Or if we cannot grow the team or move people around, then perhaps we can think of scenarios where we would try to get people, for example, taking new roles within the team. So let's say before it was always the same person who was taking the technical experts on a topic and another one was more the project manager or for example like that. Suddenly we're swapping roles. One is more support, the other one is leading the concepts, things like that. So trying to maintain that diversity even if you have the same group of people to work with in order to maintain that high team performance as long as possible. The next one is related to the previous points, which is very much around the diversity of thoughts. So diversity is something we hear about very often lately. We hear about the value of having people bringing different perspectives. And what we see in the Fortune 500 companies, which is the 500 biggest company in the world, most of them are founded by immigrants or children of immigrants. And 57% of them are in the top 35 companies. This is not by accident. This is because they have experienced a different culture, they have experienced a different way of thinking and a different way of doing things, and this is what is giving them as a competitive edge. Let's take an example where you have a not so diverse team. You have 10 people all coming from the same university, same social background, same cultural references, and you're asking them to innovate on, I don't know, a new pair of training shoes. Each one of them are going to come up with 10 ideas, but the chances of those 10 ideas being exactly the same means that out of those 10 people, you will only get 10 new ideas. In a different scenario where you have an environment where you invite 10 people and they have to innovate on the same topic, but each one now have different education, come from different countries, different backgrounds, different cultural references, religions, whatever, gender, so it can be gender, it can be many different things. Then what happened there is that maybe each one of them are going to come up with 10 very different ideas each, which means suddenly now you have 100 new ideas as opposed to the 10 new ideas you had in a previous group, which brings the way the point of innovation comes from a very different perspective and connecting the dots. And today we're not innovating, we're not inventors when we do innovation, we're only recombination innovation, which means we're connecting ideas, minds, concepts, technologies, data sets together in order to come up with the next big thing. And so this is what this chain reaction with different diverse group of individuals and team creates that innovation. Now, one could argue, if you want to be the best at a single task, you do not need diversity, right? Let's say you want to be you're doing a relay competition and you want to have 10 Usain Bolt in your team, right? As opposed to having a diverse group, some of them are good, some of them are bad. And in that case, you would get an average that is really low. So that argument makes sense only if you're trying to be the expert on a very specific task. In that case, you do not need diversity, perhaps, but you need only the best person in that particular thing. That's not the case as soon as you start involving different teams. Have a look at football teams, for example. That diversity is very, very important. The next point, is about the psychology of innovation. As a person in charge of innovation, I get very excited by new ideas. So for me, that excitement is actually triggering a completely opposite reaction to people that are not that much into this kind of big ideas, because what they see big risks. When they see my excitement, they feel anxiety. And so it's about managing those emotions that people have when new capabilities are being brought in, perhaps in a department that has always been doing things in a particular way, and they're not necessarily having the same enthusiasm as you may have into bringing this new capability because they're worried, they're anxious. And so it's about making them part of that process, of that innovation process very early on, and listening to why they feel that anxiety and why they see those big risks as opposed to rejecting them. That's very important if you want to have your innovative concepts and ideas being accepted and deployed in your organization. Another key element is psychological safety. At the stage of, particularly in some, I don't know in Chile, but in some countries, we expect the manager or the more senior person in the room to come up with all the ideas. But that's not how we are the most effective at innovation. So as a leader, hierarchy should not matter during innovation times. And being the leader of innovation is also having that strong leadership to realize that your role is to step back and let your team those motivated people, highly performing people, full of ideas people, bringing that new, feeling comfortable to bring those new ideas in that environment, and that psychological safety where they do not fear of any recriminations or any impact on their jobs in order to be the most creative. Another key psychological aspect here is that whatever facts you're going to bring in front of someone, you're not going to change their mind. Their mind is already made up at the beginning. And this is because we all suffer from a symptom called the confirmation bias. We all have this perception that when we listen to someone's presentation on a particular idea or concept, we only pay attention to the evidence that will support our existing beliefs. And we will put far less weight on evidence that contradicts them. So it is not because you have a perfectly coherent story that proves why this innovation is going to make the difference. That's not a good enough reason for you to get all the endorsements, because people have that bias. And here again, the only solution I found so far is by bringing people on with this journey of innovation and getting them on board as early as possible in the process. Another key point is spotting the intrapreneurs. So in every organization, there are people who are a little bit more creative, bringing those innovation ideas, and they have key characteristics, which we call an intrapreneur. An intrapreneur is not a job title. You can't really advertise it because there are key features they have and key capabilities. And if you start looking around you, you will find them. They have the following 6 characteristics. For example, they are silo busters. They collaborate regardless of the corporation boundaries. They spot opportunities as opposed to threats. They see innovation potentials in every risk or challenges. They're very black box thinkers and system thinkers, where they can connect things together, see the business value, the social value, and they can handle that quite well. Another key thing is they are very good storytellers. Because at that stage, you do not have a business case, you do not have data to back everything you're visualizing, then being a very good storyteller will bring your vision forward, will get people behind those shared values, and that's a very important skill to have. Another point is most of the time they are dreamers, they are super optimistic people, but they're also doers and try to make it happen. So a way to get companies better at, for example, avoiding those silos is by creating these temporary incubator teams where they will start mixing up, sharing skills, and therefore those people will slowly breaking down those silos between the organization. Last but not least is about mapping out your innovation ecosystem. Every entity within your innovation ecosystem has a very important role to play around you. We have the institutions. In my case, working in the space industry, I would work a lot with European Space Agency, with NASA, with all sorts of space agencies. And those institutions are here to enable the technology innovation, to augment the readiness level, to shape perhaps the policies and the space agendas in my case. Another key role that university and research centers have to play is developing the intellectual property, is fostering talents, and those are very important partners to have once you've identified a key area you would like to know more about. Corporations, of course, have a big role to play in terms of bringing solutions to the market. Sometimes they provide in-kind infrastructure and resources. They run pilots with customers, and they bring that scalability that perhaps smaller businesses do not have. But the smaller businesses, on the other hand, have that entrepreneurship approach. They are more agile, quicker, and they have higher risk appetite and bring also another dimension to the problem. And finally, of course, working with startup incubators, you have a great capability for that in Chile, and transforming those ideas into businesses with very high risk appetite is what startups are the best at. And also bringing distribution channels and customer insight is an important part of the innovation ecosystem. So you don't develop a solution in isolation and bring it to market too late and without having gotten the feedback from the customer. So those are my kind of 10 tips for you. And really, those 10 tips is to kind of highlight and emphasize that when ideas are shared, it's not just you're adding up on possibilities, but you're actually multiplying them. And so on this note, I thank you very much. And if you have any question, I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks to you for these 10 tips. And it's like a journey. And you make us to travel through that journey and these 10 tips. So we have several questions. If you let us just to go deeper in some points. For example, the first question we have is, as this roadmap that you gave us, these 10 tips, do you use technology roadmaps to choose the new hypothesis to be tested, or in order to part of the process?
Yeah, that's a good point. So what I use is different type of technology roadmaps. I would work on the kind of the high trends, like for example, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, Internet of Things. You know, there's big trends you have in the world. So trying to understand what's happening, blockchain, what's happening in all those kind of key trends, and asking myself, is any of those trends have reached enough maturity to be relevant to the new roadmap of the business, and how can it help the roadmap of the company and the strategy of the company to be accelerated or supported. So it's kind of, you use the internal roadmap, yes, your technology roadmap, your business roadmap, and your 5-year strategy plan, as well as looking at where the technology is going. And then remember, I talked about the ecosystem. It's kind of, if you find like, now I want to work on blockchain, for example, and I want to see how blockchain can be used for my business, then slowly I would look at not only gathering the insights of blockchain, but also start to identify which are the startups working on blockchain. How can I do a pilot project with them? How can I test out if the solution is mature enough for benefiting my business? So again, bringing that experimentation mindset and overlapping the roadmaps in order to answer, is it too soon, or is it the right time to adopt and incorporate that new capability in my business?
And for sure, it's part of that roadmap that in some part of that roadmap, you have to take considerations about the business model. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I would like to know, how is it that you insert real options on a business model? Can you give us some examples of that?
Sorry, the line is breaking up a bit. Can you repeat the last sentence?
If you can make some examples to make it graphic, just to understand your point.
Yes. So let's say it's difficult not to talk about things that are still in the making, which I cannot talk about. But I will keep my blockchain example because it's theoretical and not applied to anything. Let's say you want to use blockchain for, so I'm sure the Navy is using a lot of vessels, and you want to monitor the engine's performance of your vessels, for example, and you want to use Internet of Things. I'm making a business a use case. You want to use Internet of Things technology to monitor the engine performance of a boat, of a fleet of vessels, so you optimize your maintenance and your operation cost. So you would go to your management and you would say, look, the business case for that is it's going to save us 10 million a year of maintenance costs. It will allow us to extend the lifetime of our engines on the boats. Those are the hypotheses. You do not really have concrete data to measure that. And the way we're going to collect those data is going to be through a platform that will do X, Y, Z, and will be able to predict the right time where an engineer needs to go on the boat and do that maintenance. So based on this scenario, you've emitted a hypothesis. You're going to start working through your first proof of concept, perhaps demonstrating what is the Internet of Things technology you want to put on those engines to validate this business model. Perhaps you're going to work with the first customer to see how he's using these first data sets you have collected. And so it's about saying, in an ideal scenario, this is the 10 million you're going to save a year this is the option value. And these are the different proof of concepts we're going to develop at maybe £50,000 each. The first proof of concept will only require £50,000, but I'm going to get closer through that little proof of concept I'm building with an engine monitoring Internet of Things solution. I'm going to be able to demonstrate the value this data I'm collecting is bringing. I'm going to be able to show that the customer is actually using it, and that actually I am more and more confident I can save money to the organization.
Thank you, yes. And when you have a portfolio, because the ideas doesn't live on his own, yes? No. And when you have a portfolio, I assume that for every stock you have, expect some risk and expect some returns. And so to manage the appropriate diversifications, to maximize the utility, maybe you have some certain utility function. And how do you assess them for every innovation initiative?
So the way I try to look at it, and it's required, like you have to map on a kind of a piece of paper, map where the innovation are happening the most. Is the company or the organization putting all their money in incremental innovation? For example, I'll take again the satellite example. Are we only putting our money in buying the next most expensive satellites? Or are we also looking at putting money in platform and how we use the data and how we diversify our products and how we reach new markets? So it's about mapping out where do you put most your resources and your money. Is it only in this incremental growth of existing capability, or are you also having small pilot activity that have nothing to do with your core capability, but you can see that it could expand your reach? It could expand your competitiveness in the longer term. It can't be like completely different, like it's not completely separated from the corporate strategy, but it's about mapping out, are we doing enough? Are we putting enough money in exploring new concepts or in exploring new business models where, let me take again the telecommunication example, where let's say the data is free. You're having this new business model of freemium, of free data access. How else are you going to make money if you know that the data costs zero? This is the likes of, for example, Skype, or this is how it came through, is they assumed data was free and they were selling another type of services based on a kind of underlying assumption. So it's kind of change your assumptions and see how does that trigger new innovation. And I would say look at your core investments and see if you're investing widely enough or if there are holes where you need to start focusing.
Okay, it's like a diversification of the initiatives.
Yeah.
And actually one of the tips, just taking that word diversification, one of the tips you gave us during this journey was that we have to build teams with this vision that we have to be diverse. And I would like to ask, how do you know that you have the appropriate degree of diversity on your team? Because I would like to know if too much diversity sometimes even can hurt the team, or when you know you're right. You know what I mean?
It's a very hard question to answer. Yeah. When do you have you pushed enough diversification, or is there a point where diversification is going to break everything? To be fair, the hardest team to manage are the most diverse team. But you have so many opinions, so many perspectives, so many clashes of culture and reference points. But those are also the most creative team once you've made sure that there is this knowledge sharing and this respect and this trust and this commitment. So it's very much about, I don't think you get to a point where the team is too diverse. I don't think so, but it's looking at gender diversity. So men, women, is looking at demographic diversity. Having an old person in the team versus a younger person is also a sort of diversity. Having a look at the background, which education schools have been to an elite school, or have they been to a more normal school? What culture mix do they have? All these kind of things are very important. And the more you have that ethnic diversity, demographic diversity, gender diversity, the more performing. But It's a very hard question to answer in terms of are you sure you got it right?
Actually, I'm thinking that when you're part of a team, and I'm driving to my next question, and you're part of that diversity, you are coming to the team sometimes with some very hard ideas, to call it somehow. And I would like to ask you, how do you know how to lead, only lead that team, that diversified team? How can you train yourself against those confirmation biases, your ideas, previous forms? How you do that? How you fight against that?
Yeah, first of all, is being conscious of it, like realizing it. Am I being driven by my confirmation bias? I need to stop myself. And therefore, if you spot it, and if you spot yourself having already a preconceived opinion on something, having the consciousness of being curious. Just be curious. Transform this confirmation bias into curiosity. Ask questions. Get your team express more and more why they think their position is the right one. And sometimes they were wrong and you were right in your conception. But what you've done is, by being curious, you've taken them through the journey of asking themselves why that was the wrong approach. And so and sometimes you will realize you were wrong. And through that exchange and that friction and that exchange of idea, something even better will come out of it. So I would say is being conscious about this confirmation bias, and then transforming it into curiosity, asking questions, and getting people transforming themselves through that journey.
And when you're with your team looking for this relationship with other teams and other institutions, what do you look for when you're building your ecosystem map? How do you go about gather of the information and relationship with other teams?
So in that case, I would reuse again my little blockchain example, which I would be like, okay, I think blockchain is an interesting topic. I want to see how it's helping the space industry, the telecom industry. Let's start with mapping which universities in the world have the best blockchain expertise. One step. Then let's have a look at the various, I don't know, I would go on perhaps the space agency website and institution, government priorities and things like that, and have a look where have they injected money into specific programs. I would look at perhaps startups that are coming in and start having a conversation with them. And just by having this curiosity, we're back to the curiosity word, by having this curiosity and having those conversations, slowly, people will refer to you to another research center, to a customer they've done a trial with, to etc., etc. And then slowly, on that blockchain topic, you now have built your ecosystem. That ecosystem will be very different if tomorrow you want to do something on maritime applications. Perhaps those two ecosystems have nothing to do with it, or perhaps they have something in common with it. But you build ecosystems on different areas. They are not the same for
And when you're carrying these relationships with the ecosystem, and you are involved with your new idea, with the innovation idea, what do you think is the role of tech scouting on your everyday working life? And how do you know your outreach is good enough if your message gets where you want?
Yeah.
What do you think about it?
That's another hard question. And that's true. That's why I personally focus only on a limited amount of areas I build capability on, because it's very hard to be an expert on tech innovation across all the tech in the world. This is way too much. So the way I do it is I have bubbles. Slowly I'm expanding in terms of skill set. So I focus with one topic and I try to be the best at that topic, know everything about it, from customers, challenges, issues, problems, what's not working today, which problems are we trying to solve for the future, and then make sure I remain connected through newsletters, through conferences, through talking to people on this particular topic. And slowly I expand my layers of onion into more and more new areas I start building up capabilities on. If you start from a blank sheet of paper and you're like, oh, I need to know about everything in the tech industry from day one, it's mission impossible, because it's unlimited. So it's really having a look at starting with your kind of low-hanging fruits. What are the core capabilities you think, you sense is going to have a massive impact on your business, and then slowly start to expand more and more and diversify more and more.
And for all those people who's listening to us, which advice would you give to new entrepreneurs that are looking to be more innovative? For example, taking your own roadmap of 10 tips. How do we follow that roadmap? We start from the number one, where to start?
Yeah, so the benefits that a startup has is they don't have to do tip number one, which is getting their house in order, because they don't have anything to get in order. They're starting from a blank sheet of paper. So that's already a very good peace of mind. They can start from their hypothesis. So if we move to the next point, they're starting from their hypothesis, and the entrepreneur has already that mindset of, I need to do a minimum viable product to reach the market. I need to show that minimum viable product to a first customer to see how they behave. So they're having this proof of concept, proof of value, prototype mindset, minimum viable product. They do already kind of doing that. And then if they have that core capability, there will be a point, particularly an entrepreneur that is trying to raise capital, is having to show to the venture capitalist or the investor that not only they have this core capability, but they have this vision that there are going to be many other areas they're going to be innovating on. So they need to already kind of show how their onion has layers, and they're going to start with the core capability, but they already see how they're going to diversify and expand the reach with new business models, new tech, new partnership, through that mapping ecosystem as well, by expanding even more their reach. So it's kind of following the same approach, but at a more iterative. And also, as an entrepreneur, I would say don't try to show you're doing 20 innovations at the same time. That's going to be scary for the venture capitalist investor, thinking, so what are you going to put my money on? So for entrepreneurs, they're more focused, they're more agile, they're more risk taker. They should show the growth and the vision, but perhaps not wasting too much the focus, because they're still having to survive. So entrepreneurs' approach has to take kind of the best of the pivot of proceeds structure, where everybody takes in small team decision is also applicable, but don't try to be too much diversified as an entrepreneur at the beginning. It may scare your investors.
And so we can say that finally we have some easy part for entrepreneurs. They don't have to get the house in order, but exactly. That's a difference when speaking of bigger institutions or businesses already on the market. Yeah. So my next question is to that area. When we're trying to push businesses, as usual, out of the comfort area, as an innovation leader, could mean to build up tensions with other part of the business. So how do we handle that tensions? Because being an entrepreneur inside a bigger institution can be hard. So how do you handle that with big companies, with business?
Yeah, so the way I try to handle it is I try, and that's just personal experience. It's not necessarily a rule, but what I try to do is I try to bring in innovation where, in an ideal world, I would like to change the business model, I would like to change the core technology, and I would like to target new customers. If I try to do those three things at the same time, very likely it's not going to get approved and it's going to be very strongly rejected. So what I do instead is I only change one. So for example, I bring a new technology in the business, but I stick to the business as usual business model. By this way, people are already kind of familiar. They're like, oh, it's just I'm swapping this technology with this one, but the rest doesn't change. So it's kind of, you're getting them on board with something that doesn't feel too new for them, even though ultimately at some point you will change the business model or you will change some aspects of the way you're distributing this service. But to get endorsement, you're only selling it as only one thing you're changing. So that's one of the kind of the tips I use to sell things internally. But it is a hard role to have. It has to, and the beauty is the intrapreneurs are optimistic. So whatever rejection they get, they keep going and they keep pushing and they keep trying. And so it's very important to have that mindset and not get kind of depressed by rejection, because it's normal. Every organization resists the change because it's the human nature. Human nature doesn't like change. And so it's kind of, by doing innovation in an organization, you have more than just the innovation mandate. You have the mandate of transforming the company behind it. And so it's a bigger mandate than just being this entrepreneur coming up with a new concept.
Yasrine, thank you very much for your time, for your presentation, for your availability to answer all our questions. I know sometimes the questions can be hard. And thank you very much for being with us today. And now, if you let me, I'm going to pass to Spanish, just to...
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Audience, so hope to see you soon. And thank you for everything.
Thanks a lot. Very good questions.
Bueno, y a todos los que siguen con nosotros, esperamos que hayan disfrutado de la presentación de Yasrine y los dejamos cordialmente invitados para seguirnos en nuestras redes sociales. Recuerden entrar a nuestra web y descargar las bases si aún no están participando. Recuerden que el plazo es el día 30 de noviembre hasta las 12 del día para que recuerden enviar sus propuestas de postulación a la solución de los problemas que están publicados en nuestra web. Así que muchas gracias por estar nuevamente con nosotros y los esperamos el próximo martes nuevamente a las 3 de la tarde. Thank you very much, Yasrine.
Muchas gracias.
Soy vida, desde antes de que existiera la propia vida. Soy fuerza, y rujo desde las entrañas de la misma tierra. Soy quien se rompe, quien estalla, quien se postra ante ti, quien estuvo antes de que tú llegaras, y quien estará cuando te marches. Soy quien conocerá a tus hijos, y a los hijos de tus hijos, quien les marcará el rumbo. Soy quien les mostrará los espacios eternos y las líneas infinitas allá en el horizonte. Soy el aire que respiras, el sol que ciega tus ojos, la brisa que te roza en la piel. Soy el poder de alimentarte, de transportarte, de proveerte de futuro. Soy todo lo que esperas que sea. Y aún soy más. Ocupo tanta superficie del planeta que no serías capaz de imaginar. Y albergo tanta nueva vida, nuevas especies animales y ecosistemas que no alcanzarías a comprender. Estoy en las 2/3 partes del mundo en el que habitas. Soy la inmensidad que no puede calcularse. Soy tu mayor grandeza. Y estoy aquí, por ti, desde antes que tú llegaras. Y seguiré aquí después de que te marches, si es que lo permites. Soy tu desafío, el de salvarme y velar por mí. El de vigilarme, controlarme y mantenerte alerta. El de protegerme y prevenirte. El de luchar por mí. Soy el desafío de que me salves, para salvarte tú. ¿Te importo? ¿Te importa el mar que tranquilo baña tus costas? He venido a desafiarte, a pedirte que des un paso al frente y formes parte, porque soy tu mayor grandeza. Y estoy aquí por ti. ¿Y tú? Avante, enfrenta el desafío.